Here we are, less than a week to Christmas, less than 2 weeks to the end of 2023, the beginning of a new year. As promised, before this year wraps up, we're going to dig deep into the inbox. We're going to revisit a few of the topics that we discussed in 2023. So please keep writing in, dan@WRAL.com. Your feedback and ideas, of course, help steer the conversation here during this 7 o'clock hour. And we have so much more to talk about as we head into the new year. Tonight, let's talk about two things that are seemingly increasingly more difficult to do: win the lottery and buy a home. So we first talked about this back in October when a Durham man won $2 million on a scratch-off ticket, except he didn't take that full amount. You know how the deal, how this works. Winners have two options. You take that annual payment where they keep paying you, or you take the lump sum. I pose the question, why does just taking the lump sum automatically shrink a $2 million prize down to $1.2 million? Why do you get penalized for wanting your winnings now? Well, you all had some ideas here. Jim wrote in and said, I'm no expert, but I think it's because of the present value of future income streams. Due to interest, NC Lottery could earn over time. A $100,000 payment per se 20 years from now might be equivalent to a $30,000 payment today. So, Jim, not bad. You're close on this one. We looked into this, and the big number that you see on the jackpot, that's not really how much the Lottery Commission actually has on hand. That's how much they could pay you if you take the yearly installments. That smaller number you see from the lump sum is actually how much money they have in that prize fund. The number making all of the headlines is what the prize fund could be worth down the line. Okay. Remember, though, this is all before taxes. For that Durham man with the $2 million scratch-off, he took home a total of $855,000 after the lump sum and then after the taxes. He decided to use that money to buy his daughter a home. That got us thinking about homes and how you can actually afford one nowadays, and how the value of the homes we talked about doubled in just the last 2 years. It's the nature of things nowadays. That's due in part to cash buyers. You see, 1 in 3 home buyers over the summer paid for those homes in cash. Now, higher mortgage rates, they sat at a 23-year high. We're supposed to bring down the overall cost of those homes, but we haven't seen that happen. And that brings us to the second part of Jim's email, where he pointed me to the mortgage rates from years ago. Jim writes, I would say rates now are honestly more normal than they are high. And again, Jim, you aren't exactly wrong. You see, mortgage rates were far higher than 7% in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. In the late 70s and early 80s, they were around 13%. Jim says the uptick in rates today are not necessarily an entirely bad thing. But we live in a much different world today than the 70s, 80s, and 90s. This isn't in depth with Disco Dan or Dan Haggerty in leg warmers or in depth smells like Dan's spirit. Gross. But seriously, rates are lower by comparison, yes, but other factors are at play here, like the cost of childcare. You see, childcare costs are much higher now than they were then, and because more families have both parents in the workforce, more families need to pay for that childcare. Secondly, supply isn't keeping up with demand nowadays. On average, the number of available housing units increased by about 2% every year between 1975 and 2003. But since 2009, that number has stayed well below 1%, meaning fewer homes are on the market each and every year, and demand has been increasing and will only increase as expected in 2024. Mortgage rates are back below 7% now. They recently dropped a bit, and the Federal Reserve is signaling it could reduce interest rates again just a few months from now. Another viewer, DJ, said it best: when and if the rates come down, look out. It was tough to buy a home before. I believe it'll be even more difficult due to the pent-up demand. So, unless you're cashing in on those scratch-off tickets, lump sum or otherwise, DJ, you may be onto something. Tell me what you think about this. What else do you want us to talk about when it comes to the cost of living nowadays, or the lottery? A lot of people are playing that, or, anything else. We look into everything, and we aren't done looking into the updates on topics from this past year, so let me know what else you'd like us to revisit. Send me an email to dan@WRAL.com.
Yeah, Dan, I'll tell you what, I think DJ is spot on.
Yeah, he is. I don't know if he's an expert or not, but he sure talks like one.
Yep. All right.